Hi, my name's Jeff Severin. I'm the Associate Director for the Heartland Environmental Justice Center. I just want to welcome you all. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. As the Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Center for Region 7, HEJC provides technical assistance for communities that are experiencing environmental injustice throughout Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, and the adjoining indigenous nations. So a major focus of that assistance is helping organizations pursue funding for their environmental and interjustice programs, which is why we're here today in support of RTI, the EPA Environmental Justice Thriving Community Grantmaking Program for Region 7, 4, and National Central. So this is focused on Region 7. We're here to support the work that you all are doing and keep you informed about this great opportunity. We'll first be hearing from their team about this just launched funding opportunity, and then I'll come back and share a little bit about what HEJC can do to support your work. As Patrick said, as we talk today, please keep your questions in the Q&A feature. The team will answer those as we can, and there'll also be some time at the end to answer questions live. So joining me today from the TCGM team is Christine Bevick and Laura Baum, and there are some additional folks behind the scenes that will help answer your questions as well. With that, I'm just going to turn it over to Christine to get us started.
All right, thanks, Jeff. I'm Christine Bevick. I serve as the Deputy Program Director for TCGM. We support Region 7, and I'm excited to be able to go through today what this Notice of Funding opportunity is in terms of what we've released. Where we know that there are a lot of questions around this, so please drop those into the Q&A. If you put something into the chat, we're going to probably redirect you back over into the Q&A so we can get those there. It allows us to capture your question as you've presented it, as well as being able to respond to those in live time. So if you see a question there that you also have, you can click that thumbs up to upvote it, and we'll be answering those during our Q&A. All right, next slide. All right, so today, really what we want to accomplish by the end of this hour is to share that high-level description of this new opportunity and the varying tiers that are supported underneath it. So you can, by the end of this, you'll be able to understand how to use that funding notice to be able to prepare your application. Jeff will be able to share how to request assistance from the TCTAC there from Heartland to be able to help you better prepare and submit your application. And of course, because there's always questions, you'll be able to identify where to go to be able to request more information. All right, let's dive into this. All right, so for those of you who may not already be familiar with kind of the overview of the Thriving Communities Grantmaking Program, we're going to start there. So next slide. As a quick overview, the program is one of EPA's largest investments in climate, environmental, and justice activities here. And so this is providing multiple millions of dollars across the country to help support community-based organizations address issues in their communities. There are three pillars supporting this program in terms of its goals. The first is really focused on supporting capacity building. So the tiers of assessment, planning, and project development are really intended to help organizations move through the process to address issues in their communities. Second is that this whole entire program is designed to increase efficiency and help to reduce some of the barriers that have prevented community-based organizations from accessing federal grant funding previously. So the way that this application is set up, the questions, the length, the design of it, especially for Region 7, is intended to make this much easier and to be able to reduce that time that it takes not only to submit, but also to be able to hear decisions and be able to receive that funding. And then our third piece here is EPA really wanted to encourage meaningful involvement of community members in the decision-making process because these are decisions about their communities for their communities. And so we, throughout this process, the decisions and the feedback and the evaluation components are largely completed by community members. So for those of you who are on the line and attending today, you can volunteer to be part of that process. And then there is support to help you with some of that time as well. There'll be more information on that coming. But the point on that one is that RTI and our statutory partners are not the decision makers for these projects. That is something that is part of our community-driven participatory governance process. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. Next slide. All right, so who we are. So RTI is a nonprofit organization. We're really focused on improving the human condition to be able to provide research, development, and technical services. We support communities, we support federal governments, we support commercial clients. It's a wide range. This project and our work that we're doing around grant makers comes out of our RTI's Transformative Research Unit for Equity, also known as TRUE. And its focus is really on transforming those traditional research practices and mindsets to reimagine and create systems such as TCGM that help to advance equity and social justice. And so environmental justice is one of the priority areas for this work. But we're not working in isolation. We're working with EPA as well as our statutory partners across the regions. We're also supporting Region 4, and then, as Jeff mentioned, serving also as National Central. So everything that's colored on that map, we're able to provide our support for. But today we're really focused on Region 7, and we'll be working and announcing our statutory partners for that, for this area moving forward. So we're excited about those relationships and being able to connect with this opportunity more at the local level, as opposed to some of the more traditional applicants that have been able to pursue funding opportunities in the past. Next slide. All right, so to that point, eligibility, who can apply, who's this award aimed at? Again, you've heard me mention, we're focused on nonprofit organizations, community-based and grassroots organizations. And when we say nonprofit, you do not need to be a 501c3. You can be state designated. So if you have that nonprofit status, that is something that can help to support that piece there. It's also open to philanthropic and civic organizations that have that nonprofit status. We strongly encourage tribal governments, both federally and recognized and state recognized, as well as intertribal consortia to apply. Local governments are also welcome to apply. Be sure to check the who is eligible in the NOFO for some of the details around that about how we define local. Also, Native American organizations are welcome to apply, and institutes of higher education are welcome. We really want to encourage that there's partnerships also with their communities that they'll be working in. And along with that, there's also, because of how this program is designed, individuals, for-profit businesses, and state governments are not eligible to apply. Also not listed here, but we do have that over in the NOFO, is that if your organization is a nonprofit with a 501c4, unfortunately, you're not eligible to apply for this program due to the activities that are restricted for this opportunity. Next slide. All right, so for this, we are offering non-competitive and competitive, and we'll explain a little bit more about what those differences mean around competitive versus non-competitive. But there are foundational support projects that are really geared towards organizations that are just starting out. So these are severely capacity constrained local organizations that have never applied for federal funding before, who may be just getting their nonprofit status in place. They might not have had a budget last year, and this is they're funded for up to 75,000 for 1 year, and then uh, the goal there is that if you receive one of those, you may be looking to apply for a competitive in the future, but it's really designed to help organizations that are addressing environment and health issues to be able to build that internal capacity to pursue future funding. The tiered awards, again, these are assessment, planning, and development, and these are not sequential awards, so you do not need to apply for a tier 1 in order to receive a tier 2, but these are project driven. So we want to think about for your community what type of funding is needed to address the issues or concerns within your community. So if you are assessment projects are up to 150 per year or for a year, and they're really intended for organizations that are doing that initial assessment. Whether you're doing some initial research, if you're doing basic sampling, looking at initial testing, monitoring, you're starting that investigation, maybe you need to do a survey or a study within your community, or you're developing your public education around a particular topic. Those are really good assessment projects for this opportunity. The second level is planning. So for those that have projects where you've already done some of the research, you've got some basic information, these are going to be up to 250,000 for 1 to 2 years. So it's a longer project period for some of these. If you need it, it's still 250 across the 2 years. And these are really intended on if you're developing your plan. So you have a project, but you need to maybe build the partnership. You need to have the outreach and education, the coordination. There's training activities there if you've got some cleanup. So these are more planning activities. If you need to prepare for more development activities further down the road, this can help support some of the small land purchases and acquisitions as well. And then our third tier is development projects. This is the one tier where if there's any construction involved, they are going to be limited to the tier 3. Funding is up to 350,000 for up to 2 years. And again, anything that involves construction will be under a tier 3, but these are really intended for carrying out those projects. So if you've already assessed, you've already planned, this is putting those into place. And so these are still smaller projects because it's 350. But if you have additional funding outside, you can help to leverage that for these as well. So this again can be the construction, it can be any permitting activities, land purchases or acquisitions, implementing the project plans that you may already have in place, and then also again continuing public outreach and education here. All right, next slide. All right, so timelines. If you've got your project identified, then the question is well, when do I need to submit my application? So for this program, applications are going to be accepted on a rolling basis. So when your organization is ready, you can submit your application. Our decisions are going to be announced on a quarterly basis. So for those, what we've identified is a series of target dates to submit for funding. So the first target date is January 31st of next year. And so January 31st is for the first round of decisions. And then, if there's pieces that you're still working on, if you just want a little more time, then April 30th is going to be your next target. So you can submit anytime between now and January 31st or up until April. Again, it's when your organization is ready. And we'll talk a little bit more about what happens after you submit and how to use that time wisely. So the highlighted dates here, October 31st for 2025 and 2026, those are the last dates for those 2-year projects. So on the previous slide for the tier 2 and the tier 3, if you have those larger projects and they need those to happen over 2 years, that's October 31st, 2025 is your deadline for that. And then if you have a 1-year project, the last date to submit for those is going to be October 31st, 2026. And for those of you who are curious, all these slides and the recording will be available as well. So these dates will be made available to you so you can don't have to worry about trying to get a screenshot or scurrying to write these down. And then to wrap things up, so these are going to be our 6-month projects. They could be a tier 1 or a foundational project. The final date to submit applications is going to be April 30th, 2027. And then after submissions, what we have is the initial administrative review, which I'll go into a little bit more in the later slides, and then the decision-making process. So those decisions announced quarterly are driven by our community-guided decision process. Next slide. All right, so what does it mean when we say guided by community members? Decisions around who gets funding and which applications are going to be supported those decisions are going to be made by our community advisory boards. These will be multi-state boards. There'll be 4 of them across Region 7 that will be reviewing the applications and making those decisions about support. They'll also be informed, so the competitive awards, so those tier 1 through 3, are going to be supported by our reviewers. So these are the community members who are bringing their expertise, whether it's technical, professional, or lived, to be able to help assess that overall feasibility of projects, the alignment of that project with the program goals. So is it in the spirit of the program? Are there any concerns that the work that they're doing is not related or connecting to environment and health related goals? And is there an overall benefit to the communities that they're serving or supporting through their work? So those reviewers will be making their evaluation, and they'll be done independently, and that will be those results will be shared with the community advisory boards to be able to help make those decisions and inform those. This whole process also is supported by our tribal liaisons who are really going to be helping us create those linkages with tribes and indigenous peoples for this opportunity and being able to move forward. So these are that we have a lot of opportunities for community members to engage in the process as well as receive funding through the process. And we can get into some of those conflicts of interest, but we're working through those and continuing to think about them. Next slide. All right, so today's the Cliff Notes version of what is needed to read through the webinar. Or we read through the NOFO for this, the Notice of Funding Opportunity. But what we want to highlight is that there's more information coming in the new year. So we have a series of upcoming webinars and work sessions. So the webinars are going to be more guided listening, being able to provide more in-depth information, and then Q&A on these 4 different topics. So we have webinar 1, which is going to be applying for non-competitive awards. So making that first determination of, is your organization fit for a non-competitive, or should you be considering more of a competitive project opportunity? So that's webinar 1. That's going to be on January 7th. If you haven't signed up for future updates, you can use the link on the website there on this hashtag Stay Connected to be able to support or be able to make sure that your email is in the mailing list, so you'll get the registration for all of these webinars. Next, we have describing your organization, which goes through the first part of the application. So the application itself is divided into 4 parts. The first one is about your organization and the information that we need about what your organization does, some background, and really to be able to how to craft some of those responses for that. So that will be January 10th. Third webinar is going to be on developing your project. So this is also going to help you tease out which tier are you pursuing. The questions are the same, but your budgets might start to vary, and it may be what really fits with what your community needs. So webinar 3 is going to focus on really helping to develop your project and identify the questions that need to be answered moving through that. And webinar 4 last but not least, we're going to walk through what's needed for your proposal budget. So developing that, being able to focus on each of the categories and what falls under there. So if you have budget questions, we'll be there to identify like, hey, this is what construction means. This is what you're subject to around if you're including construction in your tier 3 budget. So those are looked at very closely, and we'll be making sure that you have that guidance about how to create your line item budget for that, as well as your budget narrative that provides that detailed explanation of what's in there. So as a reminder, please use the Q&A at the bottom of the screen there to submit your questions. Thank you to my team for being able to answer some of those. So if you don't see your question under open, it might be under answered already. So next slide. All right, so the notice of funding opportunity is available online. So you can go to the website there so region7.thrivingenvironments.org to be able to find it. Next slide. So we've set it up to be very helpful in terms of designing or walking you through the process of applying. So it's designed that you can have it open. If you have the application in front of you and you have the NOFO, it's going to guide you through that process. So it's the ready, set, apply. We want you to feel empowered. We want you to feel ready, prepared to be able to pursue these awards. So the two main sections that I want to highlight today are the apply, which is preparing your application. So it's going to provide that guidance of how to set up your account in SM Apply, which is where you'll put your application. Also how to collaborate with others as well. So if it's not just one person developing the application, but how to bring others on board as well. Also providing a breakdown of each of the application questions. So this goes down section by section. So step 1, applicant information, step 2, project information, step 3, budget information, and all the different fields that we're asking about and what that really means for the types of information that are needed to report there. So it provides that detail for each of those sections. So if you just want to zoom right in about what do I need to know about my project, you can go straight to that section there, that's step 3, to be able to see the questions that you're going to be asked about those for your project and what you'll need to answer. The second part, which is a little different from past funding opportunities, is that we also provide information about what to expect after you press that submit button or after you drop your application in the mail. So it provides that detail of the review process, breaking it down into the 4 steps, and really identifies where the 2 points are for feedback. So there's our initial administrative review, which is going to give you some immediate feedback about if there's any issues or any concerns with your application moving forward to decision. And then once your application reaches the community advisory boards, you'll receive that detail about the outcome of that decision. And so if your project was not selected for funding, you do get the feedback and the guidance of what happens next. So what? We're not funded. What do we do now? Or, oh, wow, you are funded, like congratulations, and here's what's next. So with that notice of funding decision, you do get that feedback on there. Next slide. All right, so this is just a quick snapshot refresh of those opportunities that we've touched on before. Again, the non-competitive, competitive, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Next slide. All right, so digging a little bit more into how is this application going to be different from what you might have done before, around, focusing around that goal to reduce the time and effort to complete the application. So most of the questions as you go through and look at those are going to be multiple choice or short answer. And by short answer, meaning that none of the questions are more than 500 words. So you have that space to be able to provide the responses. It's up to 500 words. So if you can be more concise, you're welcome to. The detailed description, again, of all of the information that's needed is in those different sections of the NOFO. And then that will, again, we'll also go through those during the webinars in the new year. And with the platform, if you're doing it online, you can save your work and return it anytime. So that, as well as being able to work with others on your application, different folks can log in at different times and be able to contribute to the application through there. And everyone can sign up to receive the email notifications. And just a screenshot there that you can adjust your preferences about how much email you want from the system. So we let you do that as well. So next slide. All right, so this is just a snapshot of what you're going to see in the NOFO if you haven't already had a chance to review it. We have these highlight box of what you need to know. So this is really essential key information that we wanted to pull out so that you're able to find that and making sure that you're addressing those about what needs to be, what you need to know specifically for that particular question there. And again, it provides that grouping also around, why the information is requested for the application. We also identify what information the reviewers will not see. So this may be, this is where we have, like, for mailing addresses, this is for administrative purposes. It's not something that's going to be shared with the reviewers. And then at the bottom of every page of that NOFO is how to request support and ask questions. So we have team members that are standing by reading the inputs that we get from that email and being able to respond to you. Typically right now, because the volume that we have is about 1 to 2 days. Next slide. All right, so what is the difference? What makes it competitive versus non-competitive for those foundational support projects? The difference there is really in that second section around the project information. This is where we have the variation. We still need to have all the organizational information. We still need to have a budget, and we still are going to ask some questions about whether or not you receive technical assistance. But in that project information, the questions are a little different. So instead of having a full set of 17 questions that projects will have to answer for the tier projects, it's much shorter. It's an 8-question section that really focuses on the capacity building for your organization. The other piece, and this is where that differentiation between competitive versus non-competitive, is that if it's non-competitive, the decision is made directly by the community advisory boards without those external reviewers. So it does not go to external review for any additional input there. It just goes straight to the community advisory board for decision. All right, next slide. All right, so what happens next? This is going to be tip where our goal is that this is all going to happen within about 3 to 6 months. Closer to 3 months from the time that you submit. So there's an initial administrative review, as I mentioned. It's the goal of identifying if there's any blockers to funding. So do we need to refer you to HEJC for some additional support on pieces? Do we need to ask for any corrections? Do we need more information about anything? Typically, that's going to revolve around the budget if there isn't enough detail there. But the goal is there anything that's going to immediately serve as a barrier to your organization receiving funding? Because what we don't want to have happen is we don't want you to get all the way through and have the CAB be like, this is a wonderful project and we want to support it. And then we identify that there's something in your organization's history or something that will prevent you from receiving funding. And so the this initial administrative review is going to identify those and provide that immediate feedback to you. And that's typically our goal, is that that's going to happen within about 10 days of whenever you submit your application. So again, if you're doing that where you're before the January 31st, then their goal is that we're going to do that initial administrative review within that time period before that. So you also have that time, a little more time also to provide those corrections, but you'll have a deadline and a turnaround in there before it then advances. So the non-competitives are going to go straight to that, straight to CAB for that determination. If you're doing a tier 1 through 3, those are going to go to external review for that review process, which if you're doing a tier 2 and 3 might include a technical review as well. The community advisory board is going to look at the applications. They're going to consider those external reviews. They're going to talk about those applications and then make the decision for all of those. So then it comes back to us as grant makers, to RTI as the grant maker, and yes, grant administrator, to fund or to share the decision about fund or not fund with you as the organization. And again, that'll include the guidance on the next steps, including feedback if there's any, if resubmissions are allowed and encouraged, and then referral to the TCTAC for any assistance to help make your application more competitive moving forward. Next slide. These are the timelines. So again, just if you wanted to jot down a couple dates, here's what they are. Decisions are going to be announced on the quarterly basis of what's been funded, how much has been funded, and the percentage of funds remaining following that decision cycle. All right, next slide. All right, and with that, I'm going to turn things back over to Jeff to be able to share a little bit more about the available technical assistance for applicants. Jeff?
Thanks, Christine. Yeah, so want to make a clear distinction here between kind of who we are and what the Grantmaking Center is. So we are a technical assistance center. Our job is to help you apply for these funds, help you get ready for the grants. So we aren't the ones that have the money or are managing these grants. We're just here to help you get that money. And as I said earlier, we are the TCTAC for Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, and the adjoining indigenous nations. As a technical assistance center, our focus is on helping folks pursue funds. We also recognize there are lots of things that come before getting that application completed. So we're here to help you through that process of kind of thinking about what your project needs are, what your priorities are, getting everything lined up and ready to go, and then helping you through that application process as well. Next slide. Here is our team. We are based out of Wichita State University's Environmental Finance Center, but we are kind of spread out throughout the region. So I'm based in Lawrence, Kansas. We have a couple of our project managers here in Lawrence as well. Mandy LeBrier's out in St. Louis, and then we have staff in Wichita. We have community engagement coordinators in Wichita, Kansas City, and then up near Lyons, Nebraska, supporting tribal communities. So even though we're technically based out of Wichita State, we are really spread out throughout the region and here to help remotely or in person, however, whatever makes the most sense in each case. So next slide. We also have lots of partners across the region because we can't do this all just with our own staff. Great partners throughout. Some are very state specific. So the Center for Rural Affairs primarily supports communities up in Nebraska. Obviously, the Iowa Environmental Council and Kansas Rural Center support the communities in their respective states. Climate and Energy Project is also based primarily in Kansas. And then we have some organizations like the Environmental Protection Network and the Community Engineering Corps that provide services nationwide, are part of a lot of TCTACs across the nation. And they have a strong network of volunteers that can provide very specific either engineering technical expertise or kind of subject matter specific work through folks who used to work for the EPA if in the case of EPA. And then we also work with Kansas State University. They have one of the partners in that group, the Technical Assistance for Brownfields group that covers all of our region. And I know a lot of folks have brownfields related questions, so they're a great partner as part of this network as well. Next slide. So our job is really to start from a place of deep listening, to understand what your community needs, what your challenges are, what your priorities are, what barriers you've come across in the past, and how we might be able to help you get past those barriers and get funded through project or funds like like this one and others. And from that point, we're able to provide more customized support around your specific needs. And next slide. Here's how we do some of that work. Again, primarily around grant development is our main focus. That doesn't mean we will write a grant for you. It just means that we can help you through the whole process. And that could be starting with that concept development. It could be helping you develop budgets. It could just be kind of helping you get started and doing some brainstorming and thinking about what it is that you want to approach. Some other services that we provide generally, whether it's for this grant or others, is kind of helping folks with education and outreach. So if you just see a need in your community to learn more, or within your organization to learn more about environmental justice, what that might look like in your community, we can help with that. As part of building up towards grant development, we can do some planning sessions, whether that's working on some strategic planning to help you think about what those needs are, and set some priorities. We also, as I mentioned, through our network, have a lot of technical expertise on subject matter, but also with some of these systems like grants.gov, sam.gov, that are needed to apply for federal funds. And then finally, we also do a lot of work just helping connect people, whether that's individuals with organizations that they share an interest with, or connecting organizations together that maybe are working towards the same project and could use some collaboration in either regionally or in the same community to really strengthen those proposals that require a little bit more partnership and collaboration with other entities. Next slide. So specifically for this grant opportunity, we're adding a few additional opportunities. First of all, is we've been doing some meet and greet sessions. We've got some scheduled for January and February. If you want to just come and learn a little bit more about us as an organization and how we can provide specific services, whether it's for this or for other projects that you're working on. We'll also, of course, be sharing a lot of information about this grant and answering questions through those sessions. I'll drop a link to our events page here in a little bit. We also will be scheduling more specific office hours. So if you've just got a quick question, you can sign up to meet with a staff member, just have that quick one-on-one time with folks. When you sign up for services specifically, you'll also get a link to schedule some time, maybe a little bit longer time if you need it, to talk through your project ideas. We also, as I mentioned, have a great partner network, and the Environmental Protection Network has some grant maker specific tools on their website. So they've got a how-to kind of step-by-step guide for applying. They have an AI tool that you can use. It's not going to write the grant for you either, but it's going to help you kind of get started with some ideas if that's a tool that you're comfortable with and want to give a try. It's a good starting point for folks who have a little bit of maybe writer's block getting started with grant writing. And then finally, after this kind of first cycle, we'll be starting some in-person and virtual workshops, and those will be really providing some more direct assistance with your application, going through the sections of the application and providing some time for you all to work on that while staff are available to provide direct technical support and kind of help through that process. Next slide. This is the best way to get a hold of us. Always go to our website, heartlandej.org. You can click on, and I wanted to say contact us, but I'm pretty sure the button changed just today or yesterday. And now it says request assistance. So click on request assistance, fill out that form, share a little bit about your organization, share about the challenge that you're wanting to address. And when you fill out that form, if you select that you have questions about this grant, the kind of message that will pop up afterwards has a link to just automatically schedule time on one of our team members' schedules. So just that's a quick way to get in touch with us. You can also subscribe to our email list. We have a newsletter that goes out occasionally, and any sort of like major update that we send out through that list you'll receive. And then of course, there's always Facebook and LinkedIn, so follow us there for additional information. I think that brings me to the end of, yep, it sure does.
All
Back to
right.
you, Christine.
Okay, great. Yep. So it's definitely the lesson here is that check the websites often for updates. There's going to be information coming out on a regular basis that are updated there. Being able to subscribe, so you're getting those emails as things come up. So that's there. On the website that is Stay Connected, there's a box there if you're interested in serving as a member of our community advisory boards, or if you're interested in reviewing applications. Both of those, there's lots of boxes there to be able to check, and you can check all the boxes if you want, or just one or two. So between now and when you are decide that yes, you're going to pursue that preparing an application. One of the first things is really thinking about your project needs, about what do you need to do, or what does your organization need to do to address an issue in your community. So what is the issue, and then what is the project that this opportunity can help you to address. I know I see the questions over there about the examples of projects that are allowed. Look at the activities of what do you need to accomplish? Do you need to acquire land? Do you need to do an initial assessment to be able to know the level of cleanup that's necessary for something? Does your organization just need to boost awareness and increase public education? So start thinking about what the verbs are for those projects, and that can help you to align with which project here you need to pursue. So dig into the notice of funding if you haven't had a chance to, and check if you don't know if your organization has a UEI, a unique entity identifier, check on that to see. And that's one where you can also connect with Jeff and his team at Heartland to be able to get set up with sam.gov. There are lots of resources there to help your organization with that. And then start thinking about budgeting. And by budgeting, meaning what do things cost? How do those costs break down? What is that going to look like? And so we'll get a little bit more into that, but we've got that whole webinar next month on how to write up that budget moving forward. So next slide. And I think we're going to open it up. So yeah, this is the page, what the contact us will look like, except for it's going to be really blue because Region 7 is blue. But down at the box there is those interest areas. So those are those boxes that I mentioned that you can check one or all, as many that apply that you're interested in. So next slide. All right. So I guess we're going to open it up for questions. I see a lot of them in there. A lot of them are answered, which is great. I know I flagged a couple of those that we can answer live. So Laura, do you want to help me with this? And
Sure,
where do we
I'd
start?
love to help you with this. We'll do our best to answer as many of these questions as we can. I know some of them have already been answered in writing, so we're going to focus on those that are better to answer live. So I wanted to start with some of the capacity building questions that are for that level of grants. There was one that is asking if staff salaries are allowed under the capacity building tier, and then what are the requirements to qualify for the capacity building level?
All right. So, like I said, for the non-competitives, for those foundational support, you do need a budget. There's a whole category for personnel in there because even though these are intended for small, severely capacity constrained organizations, many of you might, like many of these organizations that we're looking to support through these opportunities, may not have been able to provide support to staff. So your members of your organizations may have been doing the work on a volunteer basis or a very part-time basis, and you want to be able to elevate them to full-time or even just part-time to compensate them for the level of effort that they're providing. So yes, staff salaries, staff support is definitely allowed under the tier of those the non-competitive foundational support awards. So yes, there is a category for there. You can check out the budget section about how to write that out as well. And then the follow-up question, Laura, that was the one about what is the criteria for that.
Correct.
So things that we're looking at for that is going to be your organization's budget from the past year. You know, did your organization have a budget? This is especially where we're looking for those organizations that are just getting started. You know, that's a piece where the lower your it's going to benefit smaller organizations for that, because the intent for this one is severely capacity constrained. Fiscal financial capacity is one of those. The other one is staffing capacity. The past experience with federal funding. If you've never received federal funds before, we want to make sure you're highlighting that. We're looking to identify organizations that have never received funding before. So as first time awardees, we want to be able to help you through the process so that this prepares you for future funding opportunities to be able to support continuing projects in your communities. The other piece is going to be on some of the challenges. So for the if your organization is based in a disadvantaged community that has been identified through the CJAS tool, so the community climate justice economic, I will not even try and break down the acronym on that one because I'm having a moment there. But that is linked in the notice of funding opportunity. These are designated by the data that from the Inflation Reduction Act, but we also are looking to receive information about whether or not your community is considered disadvantaged, whether even if the tool says no, you're not, how you can also continue to identify that, and how your organization and your community identifies in that space. But we'll have more information during that first webinar around the non-competitives for what those criteria are. All right, next question, Laura.
Great. We have a couple questions about the funding type. So there was one asking, this is a reimbursement model. There was another one asking if there's a match required, and a third asking if this works with community change grants. If a community's already received funding under community change grants, can they also get it here?
All right, so let's work backwards. If you've applied for a community change grant, these are two separate programs. We don't have a list of who applied to which program. So if you applied under that program, you are more than welcome to apply under this program. If you're find that you receive funding from another federal program, you can still receive funding for this program. It might make you, if you're seeking foundational support and you've already applied for a community change grant, your organization is probably not as capacity constrained as you might think. So these are really community change being very large, these are much more smaller opportunities in comparison to those. There's no matching requirement. So I did mention about how you can leverage outside funds. That is not a requirement for this program. There's no cost matching. So you can start with zero and say, we need to put 250 towards this land acquisition and be starting from the ground up. So you can certainly do that. If you have matching, that's lovely. But it's not required. The first question that you had, Laura, there around the structure of the payments for these grants, what's the grant model? The non-competitives and some of the tier ones are set up as fixed price. So they'll be based off of milestones that the awardees achieve. So the payments are going to be based on those milestones. So how far you have gotten on some of those work, so you can set it up so that you're receiving those funds to be able to support your future activities to get you to that next milestone. And we'll talk a little bit about that during the budgeting webinar as well. But for most of the tier ones are kind of split. For tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, those are cost reimbursement approaches. We do understand that these are going to be, like a land acquisition or otherwise where, there may not be that immediate capital sitting in the bank to be able to support reimbursement. Every awardee that's selected is also going to be paired with a grant coordinator. So you're going to have that financial business contact that's going to be able to work with you also if your organization has any of those financial challenges. So There's a section about what challenges would your organization have in carrying something out. So if there are issues with a cost reimbursement for some of the larger purchases of, hey, we are unable to fund a $250,000 land acquisition right off the bat. That's why we're applying for this, to be able to make that case there and share that. All right. Did I get all three of those?
You did. You did a great
All
job
right.
with those. Thank
Okay,
you.
great.
We had a couple questions about the Community Advisory Board. People were wondering how to serve on that and if that's a conflict of interest with applying, and just more information about the time commitments and reimbursement.
Right. So the great part is that in addition to our webinar series, in the new year, there's going to be a lot more information about the community advisory boards for those recruitments. They have not been filled. So if you are interested in serving, we are still looking. That there will be more details of how to apply and submit your interest. In the interim, it's that stay connected page and checking that box of I'm interested in serving. I also mentioned there's 4 community advisory boards. So if your organization is interested in pursuing funding, then they can still submit, because it is your service as an individual. It is your expertise as an individual that we're really valuing on the community advisory board, not you as a proxy for your organization. So what we do is we flag that that your organization has submitted, and what we make sure is that that application is not reviewed by the community advisory board that you are serving on. And the same thing goes for if you are considering applying, you're allowed to serve as a reviewer until you have an application that's actively under review. So if you're thinking about it, maybe I know I want to see what other applications might look like, serving as a reviewer is a great opportunity for that. And again, check the box on the Stay Connected for that, and we'll have more information in the new year for along those. All right.
Right. Some people are wondering if there is a certain amount of funding set aside for Region 7. And
Yes.
relatedly, how much funding is being awarded, and if funding is distributed for the last quarterly deadline, will you stop accepting applications?
Right. So there's yes, there is dedicated funds that have been reserved for Region 7. We're still hearing on final numbers on those, but we do have that set aside for that. So these are going to be funds that are going directly to Region 7 across the 4 states for those. On the question of how those funds are distributed across the funding cycles, it's going to be up to the CABs to decide whether they want to distribute funds where there's a set amount per quarter, or if they want to make the fund and make those decisions on a first come first serve basis. Either way, whenever the awards are announced, the remaining funds are going to be included in that announcement as well. So if we have if that first round funds a certain number of projects, then we'll be able to say that, hey, there's still 75% of funds remaining. And we recognize that with especially projects or programs that have a rolling basis, there's always that question of, great, is there going to be any money left whenever I want to go ahead and apply? And when my organization is ready, are there still funds? So if we start approaching where we get to more than 50% awarded, more than 75% awarded, as things start to move the remaining funds start to once that number gets lower, dwindle. Yeah, yeah. That information will be shared also, and we'll have that available. So part of this is transparency. We want you to know what's there. I think that covers it. Yeah.
Thank you. Somebody was also asking if land acquisition can be a part of the project. They want to clean up an area that has been a site for chronic illegal dumping, but need to purchase the land first.
Yep. That qualifies both under a tier 2 and a tier 3. So if you can get it for a bargain deal under a tier 2, go for it, because that would be part of your planning, and that can include those small land acquisitions there. So yes, land acquisitions can be used for land acquisitions. So
Right. I love a quick answer because that means we can get
Yeah.
some more. What kind of reporting requirements are there and where are those documented?
Yeah, so those reporting requirements right now are still with OMB. So if you go to the Federal Register, you can find those under the general OMB piece, so you can actually see what those reporting forms look like. But they're going to be something that you're going to meet with your grant program officer each month, and they're actually going to help you with those reporting requirements. So we've managed to reduce it down so it's not the same level as you might have if you were directly funded by a federal agency. Again, we've tried to really reduce that burden of the reporting requirements for those. For your organization, a lot of it's going to be invoicing. It'll be the invoicing, it'll be the providing those just what have you been doing over the past month kind of pieces. So whenever your organization is selected, you'll receive a copy of those reporting templates. And if there's any questions or any concerns, you'll be able to review those prior to receiving your award.
And I know we have about 5 minutes left in the session, so we're going to be able to get to a couple more questions, but we would like to put up a feedback survey just to hear from you all how you thought the session went. We're always trying to improve. So if you can fill that out when you have a chance, and we'll go ahead and keep answering questions. We have a couple questions about the different tiers and how the projects should go through if they can go on different tiers. So one person asked, do sites need to have a tier 1 and 2 for competitiveness?
Nope, nope. So they're non-sequential. It is really about what is the project that your organization needs to accomplish at this time when you're applying. If you need to be doing that initial assessment, so say if you have a local brownfield and you've got to do that initial assessment so you can then leverage that to future funding under the Brownfields program, which is a really great kind of stepping stone. This can help support that under a tier 1 for that. If you need to do initial soil sampling, if you need to do some water testing, you can do that with the tier 1. If you've got the land acquisition, it's going to be more than 250,000. The tier 3, the implementation can help also with that land acquisition as well. So it goes to what is the need in your community? So fitting the project with the funding. There's no prerequisite for that. The only limitation or sort of restriction that we have is that if you are applying for a non-competitive, you cannot receive a competitive until you've completed your non-competitive. And that is simply because it is so focused on the capacity building for more severely capacity constrained organization. With that, we want your organization to be able to focus on building that capacity and then being able to move into one of the other tiers.
Okay. Relatedly, one person asked if they could complete one application for a tier 2 and 3 funding project because there's overlap in the cleanup to construction.
If it's the same community, same project, it's one application and then another. So if you submit 2 applications for related projects in the same community, you might be asked to prioritize which one you would prefer to have funded. So the intent is to fund as many communities as possible. So the likelihood of the CABs being able to make multiple awards to the same communities is going to be fairly low for each of these cycles. Yeah.
Thank you. There are quite a few questions on specific eligibility for an organization. What would be the best way for people to get those answers?
Yeah, so check out the notice of funding opportunity on the page. It has a lot of detail about how do we define for municipalities. What are the requirements for that one? I saw that one in there. There is one around the 501c3. I'd have to check about the LLC and the 501c3. The 501c3 is likely going to trump that on that, so that it's because it's going to go on with that your IRS designation, because you can't be for profit for these projects, as well as again the clarification around the 501c4 and the ineligibility piece there. There's more information on there, and if even after going through that, if you still have questions, send us an email at info@thrivingenvironments.org. and we'll be able to get back to you on those.
I think we're about at time. If you want to provide clarification on just one more question that we've
Sure.
already
Well,
answered.
and we've got the websites up here, and then that email that I just mentioned
Mhm.
about where to send those questions. Yep. What you got?
Somebody asked if they want, it's about the reimbursement. So they asked if we want to buy 40,000 worth of air quality monitors, but don't have that money to prepay. Do they get loans and reimburse them when they get the money, or how's that supposed to work?
You're going to work with your project officer and your grants coordinator for that one. So there's ways that we'll be able to work with you on that, because we do recognize that organizations don't necessarily have a big check sitting in their bank accounts. So, yep, don't let that be a barrier. So,
Thank you.
all right, great. Well,
I think
thank you,
that's it.
Laura.
Questions? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Thank you, everyone, for joining today and being able to lend your hour to this. The recording will be shared. Give us a few minutes there, a little bit of time there. And I think this is our last slide. Okay. Yes. Okay. Make sure you're subscribed to get those future updates. And do we have any other housekeeping, Laura?
None, thank you. But there is a sam.gov office hours starting now if anyone is interested.
Lovely. All right. Onward and upward. Thank you all.